There is a moment in every person's life when they realize that almost every painful emotion they have ever experienced came from expecting something from someone else. Approval, attention, recognition, love, respect. The strange thing is, the more desperately people chase these things, the further they move away. Yet history reveals an uncomfortable pattern. The people who commanded the greatest respect rarely asked for it. The people who influenced entire civilizations never begged to be understood. And the individuals who possessed extraordinary power learned something that most people never will. The less you need from the world, the more powerful you become. This isn't arrogance. It isn't isolation. It isn't isolation. It is something far more dangerous. Psychological detachment. Most people misunderstand this concept. They imagine someone who feels nothing, someone who doesn't care, someone emotionally disconnected. But true detachment has nothing to do with becoming emotionless. It means refusing to let your emotions become controlled by forces outside yourself. Imagine two people walking into the same room. One constantly scans every face. Do they like me? Did I say something wrong? Why didn't that person smile? Every reaction becomes a threat. Every silence feels like rejection. Every opinion becomes a personal attack. Now imagine someone else, calm, observant, present. Not because they believe they're superior, but because their peace doesn't depend on anyone's approval. That difference is invisible, but everyone can feel it. Human beings are unconsciously attracted to emotional stability. We instinctively trust those who appear impossible to manipulate. This is why detached people often become magnetic without trying. They are no longer negotiating for acceptance. They simply exist with quiet confidence. Ironically, this is exactly what makes others seek them. Modern psychology explains this through emotional independence. The less your emotional state depends on external validation, the more resilient, confident, and influential you become. But philosophers understood this thousands of years ago. The Stoics believed that suffering begins the moment we try to control what doesn't belong to us. Other people's opinions, other people's choices, other people's feelings. These are battles nobody wins. Marcus Aurelius wrote that your mind becomes your prison only when you hand its keys to someone else. Think about that. How many people today wake up already giving those keys away? One notification changes their mood. One criticism ruins their confidence. One ignored message destroys their entire day. Without realizing it, they've surrendered control of their own emotional world. Power begins when you quietly take it back. Detachment is often misunderstood as something cold, but true emotional detachment doesn't make you love people less. It simply prevents you from losing yourself in the process. The strongest minds in history never allowed temporary emotions to make permanent decisions. Modern neuroscience explains why. When we experience rejection, criticism, or emotional conflict, the amygdala immediately reacts. It prepares the body to fight, escape, or defend itself. In that moment, logic begins to disappear. Words become weapons. Silence becomes unbearable, and impulsive decisions feel justified. But remarkable individuals learn something different. They create space between emotion and action. Viktor Frankl once described this space as the place where true freedom exists. Between what happens to you and how you choose to respond lies your greatest source of power. Most people never discover it. Instead, they react automatically. Someone ignores their message, they panic. Someone criticizes them, they defend themselves. Someone disagrees, they immediately try to explain. Without realizing it, they've handed complete control of their emotional state to someone else. Powerful people refuse to live this way, not because they don't feel emotion, but because they refuse to become servants of it. Imagine standing in front of a calm lake. Throw a small stone, and the water eventually becomes still again. Now imagine a violent storm. Every wave crashes against another. Nothing reflects clearly. The human mind works exactly the same way. A restless mind cannot see reality. It only sees emotion. This is why emotionally detached people often make better decisions. Not because they're more intelligent, but because they can see clearly while everyone else is overwhelmed. Sun Tzu understood this centuries ago. A commander who loses control of his emotions has already surrendered part of the battlefield. The same principle applies to everyday life: negotiations, relationships, leadership, business, family. The first person to lose emotional control usually loses strategic control as well. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions. Suppressed emotions eventually demand attention. Detachment means observing your emotions without allowing them to become your master. Notice anger without speaking from it. Notice fear without obeying it. Notice disappointment without building your identity around it. Marcus Aurelius practiced this discipline daily. He reminded himself that external events possess no power on their own. Only the meaning we assign to them creates suffering. Imagine how different your life becomes when another person's opinion is no longer capable of destroying your peace. Imagine entering every conversation, every challenge, every disagreement without carrying the desperate need to be understood. That quiet certainty changes everything. People begin to notice, not because you demand attention, but because your calm becomes impossible to ignore. Real influence has never belonged to the loudest voice. It belongs to the most stable mind. And stability is born from emotional discipline. But one question still remains. If detachment creates freedom, how can anyone develop it in a world constantly demanding their attention? The answer lies in a handful of timeless habits practiced by philosophers, leaders, and extraordinary minds for thousands of years. In the final part, we'll uncover those habits and reveal the greatest paradox of all: why the moment you stop chasing people is often the moment they begin chasing you. Most people spend their entire lives trying to control something they never truly can. Other people's opinions, other people's choices, other people's emotions. And in that endless pursuit, they quietly lose control over the only thing that ever belonged to them: their own mind. True detachment begins with a simple realization. You cannot force admiration. You cannot negotiate genuine respect. You cannot make someone value you. The only thing you can shape is your own character. Ironically, that is exactly what changes how the world responds to you. History is filled with people who were misunderstood in their own time. Marcus Aurelius was criticized. Abraham Lincoln was mocked. Winston Churchill faced rejection before becoming one of history's most influential leaders. They shared one remarkable quality. None of them built their identity upon the approval of the crowd. They were guided by principles, not applause. This is the hidden psychology of detachment. It is not about becoming distant from people. It is about becoming deeply connected to your values. Because when your decisions come from conviction, instead of validation, you become extraordinarily difficult to manipulate. The world constantly rewards emotional reactions. Social media encourages instant outrage. Arguments demand immediate replies. Silence is mistaken for weakness. Patience is mistaken for hesitation. Reflection is mistaken for uncertainty. But history tells another story. The greatest strategists waited. The greatest philosophers observed. The greatest leaders remained composed while everyone else surrendered to emotion. They understood that every unnecessary reaction gives away a piece of your power. Every impulsive explanation weakens your position. Every desperate attempt to be understood places your emotional peace in someone else's hands. Imagine waking up tomorrow without needing to impress anyone, without fearing criticism, without measuring your worth by attention, praise, or approval. How differently would you speak? How differently would you make decisions? How differently would you live? That freedom is not imaginary. It begins the moment you stop asking, "What do they think about me?" and start asking, "Am I living according to my principles?" This shift changes everything, because confidence is not built by hearing compliments. It is built by keeping promises to yourself. Respect is not earned by demanding attention. It is earned by living with consistency. Influence is not created by speaking more. It is created when every word carries weight. And peace is not found when the world finally accepts you. It is found when you no longer require the world to do so. Perhaps that is why the most powerful people often appear so calm. Not because life is easier for them, but because they have stopped fighting battles that can never truly be won. They no longer chase approval. They no longer explain themselves to everyone. They no longer fear being misunderstood. Instead, they invest their energy where it has always mattered most, mastering themselves. And that may be the greatest lesson history has quietly whispered for centuries. Power does not belong to the person who controls others. It belongs to the one who cannot be controlled. Because in the end, the strongest mind is not the one that conquers the world, but the one that never surrenders its peace to it. End with one final sentence. The moment you no longer need the world's permission to become who you were meant to be is the moment the world loses its power to define you. History remembers those who mastered themselves long before they ever mastered the world. So why do human beings crave validation so desperately? The answer is older than civilization itself. Long before cities, before kingdoms, before philosophy, our ancestors lived in small tribes where survival depended on belonging. To be rejected by the group wasn't merely painful, it was often a death sentence. Your brain still carries that ancient programming. Every time someone ignores you, criticizes you, or excludes you, your nervous system reacts as if your survival is under threat. That is why rejection feels physical. It isn't weakness, it is biology. But here's the problem. Modern life no longer requires you to survive through the approval of a tribe, yet millions of people still live as if every opinion determines their worth. They change their personality to fit expectations. They silence their true thoughts to avoid criticism. They sacrifice their peace just to be accepted by people they don't even admire. Carl Jung believed that the greatest prison is not built with walls, but with the masks we wear to gain acceptance. Every time you betray your authentic self, you strengthen those invisible chains. Eventually, you forget who you really are. Powerful people understand something different. They don't reject people. They reject dependency. There is a profound difference. Dependency gives others control over your emotions. Detachment gives you ownership of them. Think of the greatest military strategists in history. Sun Tzu taught that the general who remains emotionally composed sees opportunities that emotional people never notice. An angry commander makes reckless decisions. A fearful commander hesitates. A desperate commander becomes predictable. But the calm commander, the detached commander, controls the battlefield before the battle even begins. Life follows the same principle. When someone knows exactly how to trigger your emotions, they already possess influence over you. Insults become weapons. Praise becomes manipulation. Silence becomes punishment. But imagine someone who cannot be emotionally pushed in either direction. Someone who neither chases praise nor fears criticism. Such a person becomes incredibly difficult to manipulate. This is why emotional detachment is not only a psychological skill, it is a strategic advantage. Machiavelli observed that rulers who acted from emotion often destroyed themselves long before their enemies ever could. History confirms this lesson repeatedly. Empires have fallen because leaders reacted impulsively. Relationships have ended because people confused attachment with love. Careers have collapsed because talented individuals needed constant recognition. The pattern is always the same. External dependence creates internal instability. And instability always reveals itself at the worst possible moment. Ask yourself honestly, who has the greatest influence over your emotions today? A stranger on the internet? A boss? A partner? A friend? If another person's behavior can completely determine your peace, then your peace does not truly belong to you. Real freedom begins the moment you realize that your emotional state is your responsibility, not theirs. Yours. That realization changes everything, because from that point forward, you stop asking, how can I make them value me? And you begin asking, why do I need their validation in the first place? That single question has transformed lives for centuries. And in the next part, we will discover why the most respected individuals in history were often the least emotionally available. and why that mysterious quality naturally attracts admiration instead of pushing people away. Why do people seem to respect those who care the least? At first glance, it appears unfair. The person who constantly seeks approval is overlooked. The one who tries to please everyone is often taken for granted. Yet the individual who remains calm, who never chases, who never begs for attention, somehow becomes the center of curiosity. This is not coincidence. It is human psychology. People naturally value what appears emotionally scarce, not because scarcity is magical, but because independence signals strength. Think about the people you've admired most in your life. Were they desperate to convince everyone they were important? Or did they carry themselves with quiet certainty, speaking only when necessary, never needing to prove their value? Confidence is persuasive. Neediness is exhausting. Your mind constantly evaluates the emotional stability of the people around you. Without realizing it, you ask silent questions. Can this person remain calm under pressure? Can they handle rejection? Can they make decisions without emotional panic? Those who answer yes without saying a word naturally gain influence. This is why silence often speaks louder than explanation. When you feel compelled to justify every action, you unconsciously communicate uncertainty. When you calmly allow your actions to speak, people begin creating explanations for you. And surprisingly, those explanations are often more powerful than anything you could have said. Robert Greene described this as one of the foundations of power. Mystery amplifies perceived value. Predictability weakens it. This doesn't mean becoming manipulative. It means understanding that endless self-explanation rarely creates respect. It usually reveals insecurity. History offers remarkable examples. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the greatest empires in history. Yet his private writings reveal almost no obsession with being admired. He focused instead on mastering himself. He understood that controlling your own mind is infinitely more valuable than trying to control someone else's opinion. The same principle appears in Eastern philosophy. The strongest tree survives the storm not because it fights every gust of wind, but because its roots run deep. Detachment creates those roots. When your identity depends on external praise, your emotional foundation becomes fragile. Every criticism shakes you. Every rejection wounds you. Every disagreement feels personal. But when your self-worth comes from your own principles, the outside world loses its power to destabilize you. This is the hidden reason emotionally detached people appear charismatic. They are not trying to impress. And paradoxically, that is exactly what impresses others. People trust emotional consistency. They admire internal discipline, and they remember those who never needed to demand attention. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. How many decisions have you made simply because you feared disappointing someone else? How many dreams have been abandoned, not because they were impossible, but because you worried about what others would think? Every time fear of judgment controls your choices, someone else quietly becomes the author of your life. Detachment is the act of taking that authorship back, not through rebellion, not through arrogance, but through quiet emotional mastery. Because the most powerful person in any room is rarely the loudest. It is usually the one who cannot be emotionally controlled. But emotional detachment is not something you are born with. It is a discipline, one that can be trained every single day.